In our society, the rights and privileges of corporations take precedence over the health and rights of people. And so it's no wonder that the role or impact that environmental toxins play in human health is continually minimized and undermined in society and especially in the media. But the role that environmental toxins play in human health is actually well documented and well established in science. So it's not necessarily that we're going to drop dead immediately from the exposure of most common environmental pollutants. It's not as if they're going to necessarily turn us into some type of three-eyed green monster, but the role that environmental toxins play in human health is real, it's impactful, and it increases the risk. We should therefore think of our exposures and burden of environmental toxins as a real risk to chronic disease and one that interacts with our genetics and our lifestyle. One really common example of how environmental toxins interact with human health is endocrine disruptors. They're really prevalent in our environment. One example is PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls. What these compounds, as well as other ones in the class of endocrine disruptors do, they have the ability to mimic hormones. They can bind to target receptors for hormones. They can up or down regulate hormones, and they can even affect gene expression. Some of the diseases that are linked to endocrine disruptors include slowing down our metabolism, obesity, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and diabetes, and also endocrine-driven cancers. Endocrine disruptors are even linked to cancer in our offspring. That's not all. Environmental toxins also pose a risk to cardiovascular disease. One example is toxic heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, and mercury. Toxic metals can instigate inflammation in our arteries. They can increase the risk of arterial disease, and they can even lead to hypertension and high cholesterol. Next is immune dysfunction. Environmental toxins are known to negatively impact the immune system. One thing they do is oftentimes decrease our immune resistance, making us more susceptible to infections caused by viruses, bacteria, and fungi. Environmental toxins can also upregulate the inflammatory or humoral part of our immune system, increasing our risk of unnecessary inflammation and even autoimmune diseases. Many environmental toxins damage our mitochondria. Our mitochondria is really important for generating energy. Environmental toxins are known to negatively affect and sometimes even cause alterations in mitochondrial DNA. More environmental toxins can damage what's known as the electron transport chain. That's where electrons are scattered across to generate ATP, which is our currency for energy. And when that gets damaged, it can increase our risk of chronic fatigue, and it can even damage and weaken the heart muscle. Environmental toxins that damage the mitochondria are also linked to movement disorders and can increase the risk of conditions like Parkinson's disease. And more, toxins that cause mitochondrial dysfunction are linked to and associated with cancers. Next is the role that environmental toxins play in our risk of cancer. Many environmental toxins are carcinogenic. These toxins can increase the risk of several cancers, especially blood-borne cancers like lymphoma, but also endocrine cancers like testicular cancer. Environmental toxins can play an extremely negative role in fertility. Many different classes of environmental toxins are associated with our ever-increasing decreased fertility rates. More environmental toxins can increase the risk of developmental disorders, preterm births and miscarriages, and can even increase the risk of diseases like obesity and heart disease in the offspring. Lastly, environmental toxins can increase the risk of cancers in the offspring. And finally, many neurological diseases owe their increased risk to the presence of toxic pollutants in our environment. What many environmental toxins do is increase inflammation in brain cells. They can damage neuron to neuron or brain cell communication. They can alter the function of sodium channels in the brain. And in that, they tend to increase oxidative stress and inflammation. Also, many environmental toxins can damage the blood-brain barrier. That's a delicate network of cells that protects us from noxious and toxic substances that should not enter the brain. There are many neurologic symptoms that can be linked to and caused by environmental toxicity. They include headaches, tremor, dizziness, blurred vision, weakness, paralysis, cognitive problems like difficulty thinking, difficulty with memory and recall, nerve pain, numbness, tingling, depression, anger, and other personality changes also. These are just many examples of symptoms and diseases that are linked to the presence of environmental toxins. So we should therefore think of our exposure and burden of environmental toxins as an important risk factor for chronic diseases and one that interacts with our lifestyle and our genetics. If you've been taking measures to minimize your risk of exposure to environmental toxins to protect you and your family, you do so with good reason. If you've been taking measures to increase your ability to break down environmental toxins with nutritional detoxification, you do so with good reason. Fortunately, there are plenty of steps that we can take to lessen our exposure to environmental toxins. To learn more about environmental toxicity and detoxification, subscribe to my channel and look out for my next video.